The baby wasn't crying anymore. That was the problem. Snow pressed against her face in slow, quiet waves, filling the space where sound should have been. The puppy was still moving, barely, its small body tucked against hers like it understood something she didn't. Somewhere close, something heavy broke through the wind, and then everything went still. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. The storm had erased the road hours ago. What remained was a wide, white slope where direction no longer mattered. The baby girl lay half-curled against a drift, her mitten missing, one bare hand pressed into the puppy's fur, as if that alone could keep them anchored to the world. The puppy shifted weakly, nose nudging her jacket, searching for warmth that was running out. His breathing came in short, uneven pulls. The baby's eyes were open, unfocused, fixed on nothing in particular. Snow gathered in her eyelashes and melted there, unnoticed. A shape moved uphill through the storm. At first it looked like part of the land, dark, low, deliberate. Then it stopped. The wind tore around it, screaming, impatient. The shape didn't move again for several seconds, as if listening. A whistle cut through the noise, sharp, controlled. The puppy's head lifted. One ear twitched. The baby didn't react. The shape shifted direction, boots biting into ice beneath the snow. A second shape followed close behind, lower to the ground, moving with purpose that didn't belong to the storm. Together they advanced, not fast, not slow, certain. The wind howled louder, offended by the intrusion. Neither of them turned back. He hadn't planned to be there. The patrol had ended an hour earlier than expected. Visibility was dropping fast, and command had already called it. A clean return, no heroics. That was fine with him. He'd learned a long time ago that storms didn't reward stubbornness. But his dog had stopped. Not abruptly, not alarmed, just a pause. A quiet refusal to keep moving. The man followed the leash with his eyes, then the dog's gaze. There was nothing there, just white and movement and noise. Still, the dog's body had gone rigid in a way that meant something didn't belong. "What is it?" the man asked, voice low, almost casual. The dog didn't look back. Another step forward. Then another. Nose low now, cutting side to side, pulling against the leash with growing certainty. The man let it run. He trusted that instinct more than maps, more than orders. They moved uphill. The wind punished them for it. Snow hammered into his goggles, crept down his collar, burned every exposed patch of skin. He adjusted his grip, leaned into the slope, matched his pace to the dog's. Then he saw them. Too small, too still. The man stopped breathing for a second, long enough to feel the weight of what he was seeing settle in his chest. "No," he said quietly. The dog broke into a run. The puppy tried to lift its head again and failed. Its body sagged, pressed closer to the baby's chest, instinctively seeking what little warmth remained. The baby's fingers tightened once, then loosened. The man dropped to his knees beside them, snow soaking through instantly. He didn't swear, didn't shout. His movements were fast but controlled, the kind that came from repetition, not panic. "Hey," he said softly, close to the baby's ear. "Stay with me." No response. He checked her neck with 2 fingers. A pulse, faint, uneven, but there. He exhaled once through his nose and shifted his attention to the puppy. Still breathing. Barely. The dog at his side whined. A low sound that didn't ask permission. It pressed in close, shoulder to shoulder with the man, heat radiating through thick fur. "Good," the man murmured. "Good boy." He stripped off his outer layer and wrapped it around the baby and the puppy together, tucking fabric with practiced efficiency. Wind clawed at his back immediately, furious at the loss. The baby stirred then, just a fraction. Her eyes flickered. The man leaned closer. "You're not done," he said. "Not today." He lifted them both, careful, deliberate. The weight was wrong. Too light. The storm closed in behind them as he turned back the way he'd come. The climb down was slower. Every step mattered now. One mistake, one slip, and the slope would take all three of them without hesitation. The man adjusted his grip, keeping the baby's head tucked under his chin, the puppy secured between them. His dog stayed close, breaking trail, stopping often to check back. The baby's breathing stuttered against his chest. "Match me," he said quietly, forcing his own breath into a steady rhythm. In, out. He didn't know if she could hear him. He spoke anyway. The wind shifted, briefly easing, and in that narrow pocket of quiet he heard it. A thin sound, almost nothing. The puppy, still alive. They reached the tree line just as his legs began to shake. He crouched behind a cluster of pines, blocking the worst of the wind, and pressed his forehead against the baby's hat for half a second. "Stay," he told all of them, himself included. His radio crackled uselessly. No signal. He looked down at the baby's face, pale and still, lashes dusted with snow. Then at the puppy, eyes half open, refusing to close. The dog beside him sat, solid and unmoving, a silent promise with fur and teeth. The man made a decision. He stood again and pushed forward, deeper into the storm, carrying everything that mattered. The cabin appeared without warning. One moment there was only snow and shadow. The next a dull rectangle of wood emerged through the trees, its outline barely visible against the white. No lights, no smoke, just a structure stubborn enough to still be standing. The man didn't slow. He adjusted his grip and pushed harder, boots breaking through crusted snow as he crossed the last stretch of open ground. His dog reached the door first, circling once, then sitting, alert and ready. He kicked the door open. Cold air rushed inside, angry and loud, before the door slammed shut behind them. The silence that followed was heavy, almost shocking. The man stood there for a second, breathing hard, letting his eyes adjust. He moved quickly then, laid the baby and the puppy on the floor near the small iron stove, shoved wood inside, struck a match with shaking fingers that didn't feel like his own. Flame caught. The dog lay down immediately, pressing its body against the baby's side without being told. The man peeled off wet layers, wrapped them tighter around her, then checked her pulse again. Still there. He sat back on his heels, chest rising and falling, and for the first time since he'd seen them, allowed himself to feel how close it had been. Outside, the storm screamed at the walls. Inside, the fire began to fight back. The baby cried then. Not loud, not strong, just a thin sound that cracked the quiet like glass. The man leaned forward instantly, relief and fear colliding hard in his chest. "That's it," he said softly. "That's good." Her eyes opened, unfocused, drifting past him. Her fingers twitched, brushing the puppy's ear. The puppy responded with a weak movement of its own, nose nudging her sleeve. The man didn't smile. He stayed steady. Crying meant energy, but it also meant pain. He watched her breathing, counted it, kept his hands warm against her ribs. His dog lifted its head and looked at him, not waiting for orders, just checking. "I know," the man murmured. He pulled the baby closer to his chest, skin to skin now, sharing heat the way he'd been trained to when equipment failed and time ran out. The puppy stayed between them, fragile and stubborn. Minutes passed, maybe more. The fire crackled. The cabin settled around them. The baby's breathing slowed, steadied. Her grip tightened once, then relaxed. Not slipping away this time, resting. The man leaned his head back against the wall, eyes closing briefly. Images pressed at the edges of his mind. Other nights, other storms, other bodies gone cold despite everything he'd done. He opened his eyes again. Not tonight. Dawn didn't arrive all at once. It crept in through the frost-laced window, pale and uncertain, as if unsure it was welcome. The storm had softened overnight, leaving behind a world smoothed flat and quiet. The man hadn't slept. He sat on the floor with his back against the wall, the baby curled against his chest, the puppy tucked between them, and his dog stretched along their legs like a living barrier. His body ached in familiar ways. He ignored it. The baby stirred first. A small sound. A shift. Her eyes opened, clearer now, tracking the room slowly. She looked up at him. "You stayed," she said. Her voice was hoarse, but steady. "Yes," he replied. No hesitation. She nodded as if confirming something important, then looked down at the puppy. "He's cold." "He won't be," the man said. "Not anymore." The puppy lifted its head weakly, tail moving once against the floor. The baby smiled. Just a little. The man stood carefully, keeping them both secure, and added more wood to the stove. Warmth spread through the cabin, slow but real. Outside, the world waited. Inside, something fragile had held. The sound of an engine cut through the quiet. The man froze. Not panic. Calculation. He shifted the baby gently onto a blanket near the stove, keeping his dog close. The puppy stayed pressed to her side, eyes tracking the door. The engine grew louder, then stopped. Boots crunched outside. A pause. Then a knock. Firm. Controlled. The man opened the door halfway. A uniform stood on the porch, snow clinging to his coat. His eyes flicked past the man, assessing quickly. "Morning," the officer said. "We got a report." The man nodded. "You're late." The officer glanced at the sky, then back at him. "Roads were closed." "Still are," the man replied. The officer hesitated, then stepped inside. His expression shifted when he saw the baby, wrapped in blankets, alive. When he saw the puppy. When he saw the dog standing guard without growling. "Who left her?" the officer asked quietly. The baby answered before the man could. "He said he'd be back." The words landed heavy. The man watched the officer's jaw tighten, watched him make his own quiet decision. Outside, the storm had passed. What came next would not be as forgiving. The officer closed the door behind him, leaving the baby inside with the dogs and the fire. The cold hit immediately, sharp and honest. The man welcomed it, kept things clear. "Her name?" the officer asked. "Lena," the man said. He hadn't known it long, but it already mattered. "And the puppy?" The man glanced through the window. The baby had both hands buried in its fur now, grounding herself without thinking. "No name yet." The officer nodded, scribbling. "She says someone left her." "He did," the man replied. No heat, no emphasis, just fact. The officer studied him for a moment. "You military?" "Was. And the dog?" "Still is." That earned a look. Not suspicion. Recognition. "Road crews will clear a path by noon," the officer said. "After that, protocol kicks in. Medical, social services." The man didn't argue. He already knew the rules. He'd lived inside them long enough to understand where they bent, and where they broke people. "She doesn't go alone," he said. The officer met his eyes. "That's not your call." "Not yet," the man agreed. They stood there in silence, the wind moving gently through the trees now, no longer violent. The storm had passed. What remained was quieter, more dangerous. Inside, the baby laughed suddenly. Both men turned toward the sound. The officer exhaled slowly. "She's tougher than she looks." "So is the dog," the man said. By late morning, the cabin felt smaller. Not crowded, waited. A medic arrived first, efficient and careful. She checked the baby's vitals, praised her resilience without dramatizing it, then turned her attention to the puppy. "Lucky," she murmured. "Both of them." The baby watched everything closely, eyes flicking between faces, hands never leaving the puppy. When the medic finished, she nodded once, satisfied. "She'll need follow-up," the medic said to the man. But she's stable. The word settled something inside him. A second vehicle pulled in. Then a third. Paperwork followed. Questions asked gently, but persistently. The baby answered some, refused others. No one pushed. The man stayed close, always within reach, not touching unless invited. When the question finally came, who can take her? The room went quiet. The man felt every eye turn toward him. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the baby. Really looked. At the way she leaned into the puppy when voices rose. At the way she checked his face before trusting anyone else. "I will," he said finally. The words didn't feel heroic. They felt heavy, permanent. The officer nodded once. "That's a process." "I know." The baby looked up at him. "You won't leave." "No," he said. "Not again." The puppy wagged its tail, once, like it had been waiting for that answer too. The man found the tag by accident. It slid out from beneath the puppy's collar while the medic adjusted a blanket. Old metal, worn smooth at the edges. He picked it up without thinking, and froze. The letters were shallow but unmistakable. USMC K9 Rex. His breath caught, sharp and involuntary. The room faded for a moment, replaced by heat and dust and noise. Another dog. Another life trusted to him. Another promise made and broken under fire. "That's his mom," the baby said softly, watching his face. "They told me at the shelter." The man swallowed. "They did." She nodded. "Said she was brave." He turned the tag over. The notch along the edge. The one he'd filed himself years ago so it wouldn't snag on brush. It wasn't possible. And yet it was. He clipped the tag back gently, hands steady despite the storm rising inside him. This wasn't coincidence. It was consequence. Paperwork lost. Decisions made because they were easier than truth. The officer noticed his expression. "You know something." "Yes," the man said quietly. "And so does someone else." The baby hugged the puppy closer. "Is that bad?" "No," he replied. "It just means this story isn't finished." The call came just before dusk. The officer stepped outside to take it. When he returned, his face had changed. Not shocked, but sharpened. "We ran the name she gave us," he said. "There's history. Debt. A failed insurance claim involving a working dog." The man nodded slowly. "He tried to sell what he didn't earn. And when that failed," the officer continued, "he panicked." The baby sat very still, listening without trying to. The puppy pressed into her side, sensing the shift. "He might come back," the officer said. The man stood, moved to the window, looked out at the drive, now clear enough for tracks to hold. "If he does," the man said, "he won't get close." The officer didn't challenge that. Outside, an engine sounded briefly, distant, passing. The baby's shoulders tensed. The man knelt in front of her. "You're safe," he said. "That's not a promise. That's a plan." She searched his face, found no cracks. "Okay," she said. The puppy settled, breathing slow and even. Night fell again, not violent this time, just quiet, watchful. And somewhere beyond the trees, a choice was moving closer. The SUV appeared just after nightfall. No headlights at first. Just the low growl of an engine easing up the drive like it didn't want to be noticed. The man saw it before anyone else did. He'd been watching for it, counting the minutes between breaths. He didn't move right away. Inside, the baby sat on the floor with the puppy, tracing the outline of the dog's paw on a piece of scrap paper. His dog lay near the door, head up, silent. The SUV stopped short of the porch. The engine idled. The man stepped into the doorway and turned on the porch light. He didn't raise his voice, didn't reach for anything. He simply stood there, visible. The driver's door opened slowly. A man stepped out, hands empty, shoulders tight. He didn't look surprised to see them. "She's mine," the man said, voice flat. "I came back." The baby froze. The man in the doorway didn't answer immediately. He watched the way the other man's eyes flicked past him, already measuring distance, already calculating. "You left her in a storm," he said finally. The other man shrugged. "She was fine when I drove off." The words landed wrong. Heavy. Final. Inside, the puppy growled for the first time. The officer arrived seconds later. Lights flared across the snow, sharp and unforgiving. The SUV driver flinched, just slightly. "Enough." The man stepped aside as the officer approached, calm but ready. No shouting, no rush, just procedure catching up to intent. "Sir," the officer said, "turn around." The driver hesitated, looked past them toward the cabin, toward the baby he hadn't checked on once. "She's my responsibility," he said. "No," the man replied quietly. "She was." The officer took the driver's arm. The cuffs clicked closed, final and small. The baby didn't cry. She stood slowly and walked to the doorway, the puppy pressed tight against her leg. She looked at the man being led away, studying him with a seriousness that didn't belong to someone her age. "You said you'd come back," she said. The driver didn't answer. The officer paused. "You want to say anything else?" The baby shook her head. She turned away first. The man closed the door gently. Outside, the SUV was driven away by someone else. Inside, the fire crackled low and steady, as if nothing extraordinary had happened at all. But the cost had already been paid. The paperwork took hours. Signatures, statements, quiet conversations that carried more weight than they sounded like they should. The baby answered when she was ready. No one rushed her. When it was done, the officer closed his folder. "Emergency guardianship," he said. "Pending review." The man nodded. He'd expected nothing less. The baby looked up at him. "Does that mean I stay?" "Yes," he said. "If you want to." She nodded once. No hesitation this time. The puppy wagged its tail, thumping softly against the floor. Later, when the house finally went quiet, the man sat alone at the table. The dog lay at his feet. The tag rested in his palm, cool and solid. He thought of the past he'd tried to leave buried, of the promises he'd made to another dog in another storm, of the cost of stepping forward again when walking away would have been easier. This would change everything. He clipped the tag back into place carefully. "Not this time," he murmured. The dog looked up at him, steady and unblinking. Outside, the wind moved through the trees without anger. The storm had taken what it could. It would not be taking this. Morning came clean. The snow reflected light in long, quiet stretches. The valley stripped bare and honest. The baby stood at the window, the puppy at her side, watching the world come back into focus. "Will it always be like this?" she asked. The man joined her, careful not to crowd. "No," he said, "but it won't be like before either." She considered that, then nodded. They ate breakfast slowly. No rush, no fear that warmth might disappear if they moved wrong. The dog slept in the sun, chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Later, the man stepped outside alone. He stood where the tracks had been, now softened by light and time. He knew they would fade completely by afternoon. Some things were meant to, others weren't. Inside, the baby laughed at something the puppy did. A real laugh, unforced. The man closed his eyes for a moment and let the sound settle. He hadn't planned to stay. But some decisions didn't arrive as choices. They arrived as responsibility. And this one he would carry. The hearing was brief. Not dramatic, not loud. Just a small room with too many chairs and a clock that ticked louder than it needed to. The baby sat beside the man, feet not touching the floor. The puppy curled against her ankle like it had always belonged there. The questions were careful, necessary. Names, dates, circumstances. The man answered when asked. The baby answered when she chose to. No one rushed her. When they asked about the storm, she didn't describe the cold. She talked about the quiet, about how the wind sounded like it was looking for something, about how she held the puppy because letting go felt worse than freezing. The room listened. When they asked the man why he stayed, he didn't talk about training or duty or instincts. He said, "Because leaving would have been easier." That seemed to matter. The decision came without ceremony. Temporary guardianship approved. Placement confirmed. Follow-up scheduled. The baby squeezed his hand once. Just once. Outside, the world kept moving. Cars passed. People hurried. Nothing marked the moment except a door closing softly behind them. The puppy yawned, stretched, and trotted ahead like it knew the way. They drove back to the cabin in silence. Not the heavy kind, the settled kind. Snow lined the road in uneven banks, retreating slowly under the sun. The baby watched it pass, chin resting on the window. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked suddenly. The man glanced at her. "Miss what?" "Before," she said. "When things were different." He thought for a moment. "I miss who I was before I learned how much things cost." She nodded like she understood more than she should. At the cabin, the puppy ran inside first, skidding slightly on the floor, tail working overtime. The dog followed more slowly, dignified, watchful. The baby dropped her bag and went straight to the window. The lights along the drive were still there, still steady. "They don't blink," she said again. "No," the man replied. "That's the point." Later, as the sun dipped low, the baby sat on the porch steps with the puppy asleep in her lap. She traced the letters on the tag with careful fingers. "Rex," she read softly. "Yes," the man said. She looked up at him. "He didn't quit." "No," he said. "Neither did you." That night, the wind returned. Not angry, just present. It moved through the trees and across the roof, testing corners, reminding the valley what it could still do. The baby woke once. Just once. The man was there before she called out, sitting on the edge of the bed like he'd never left. "I thought I heard the car," she whispered. He shook his head. "Just the wind." She nodded, then hesitated. "If it comes back, you'll wake me?" "Yes," he said. "But it won't." She studied his face, searching the way she always did. Then she lay back down and slept. The puppy shifted closer, sighing. The man stayed until her breathing settled, then stood quietly and walked to the window. Outside, the motion lights glowed steady and bright. No movement beyond them. He rested his hand on the glass for a moment, feeling the cold through it. Some storms announced themselves. Others waited. This one had already been answered. Spring came slowly. Snow melted into mud, then grass. The valley softened. The cabin filled with small routines. Breakfasts, schoolwork at the table, walks where the puppy grew stronger and faster by the day. The baby learned the trails, learned which trees bent first in the wind, learned where the light hit longest in the afternoon. The man learned how to pack lunches, how to listen without fixing, how to stay. One evening, as they walked back from the ridge, the baby stopped and looked out over the valley. "This is where you found me," she said. "Yes." She thought about that, then reached for his hand. "I'm glad you didn't keep walking." He squeezed her fingers gently. "So am I." Behind them, the dogs waited. One old enough to remember, one young enough to begin again. The valley held the quiet, and for the first time it felt earned. Years later, people would talk about the storm, about how bad it was, about how lucky she'd been. They would miss the part that mattered most. Luck didn't walk uphill into the wind. It didn't stay when leaving was easier. What saved her wasn't chance. It was someone who chose not to let go. If the story stayed with you, let it stay a little longer. Subscribe, like, or turn on the bell if you want more stories like this. And tell us in the comments what this one meant to you, or where you're watching from.